Welcome to Cheating Uncovered. Let's dive into today's story. I'm Mart, and I found out the toughest way possible that the deepest betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people closest to you. For the longest time, I thought loyalty and hard work actually mattered. I believed if you put your heart into your job, marriage, and life, things would naturally fall into place eventually. And honestly, for quite a while, I thought I'd achieved everything I'd dreamed of: a booming career, a gorgeous wife, and a future that seemed bright with possibilities. I had a position at one of the most prestigious companies in the financial world. While everyone else punched out promptly at 5, I'd stay late, putting in extra hours, always pushing myself harder. I wasn't just logging overtime. I was laying the foundation for something meaningful. And now, after countless years of dedication, it felt like everything I'd worked for was finally about to come together. The company's yearly gala was hands down the most important event on the calendar. Promotions didn't come quietly through emails. They were announced proudly in front of hundreds of colleagues and executives. This was the place where careers took flight, where the future was defined. And I was right there among the top candidates for a huge promotion. It wasn't just about the raise or a bigger office. It was the acknowledgement, the validation that all my sacrifices have been worthwhile. Emily, my wife, the person I'd built my entire life around, was supposed to be by my side celebrating this achievement. We've been together for years. She wasn't just my wife, she was my closest friend, my partner in everything. Her loyalty was never something I doubted. Not even once. Well, at least until that evening. The venue was magnificent. Golden chandeliers sparkled overhead, tables meticulously arranged with expensive glassware. In the room packed with the company's most talented people, I stepped in confidently, my hand gently resting on Emily's waist. Tonight mattered. It could change everything, and Emily was exactly where she belonged, right by my side. She'd always attracted attention, but tonight Emily looked absolutely stunning. She wore an elegant black dress that highlighted every curve flawlessly. Her soft waves of hair framed her face in just the right way. Whenever she smiled, people stopped to notice, and when she spoke, everyone listened. The first hour or so passed perfectly. I introduced Emily to my colleagues, and she effortlessly captivated them. She'd always had a knack for conversation, always knew exactly what to say. But then something changed. It was subtle at first, quick, fleeting glances, movements I barely noticed from the corner of my eye. Initially, I brushed it off. But then I realized who had caught her attention: Ryan, my boss. Ryan had built his success from scratch, a charismatic, ruthless leader. He was the type of man who commanded instant respect whenever he entered a room. Ryan wasn't just management. In a sense, he was the company itself. And Emily had locked her eyes onto him. This wasn't some casual glance across the crowd. Her stare lingered, and soon Ryan noticed. His lips curled into a knowing smirk. He was fully aware. He knew exactly the kind of reaction he was getting from her. A strange feeling settled deep in my stomach, twisting slowly. Emily turned away, laughing at something one of my coworkers had said. Her expression was carefree, casual. But a heartbeat later, her eyes flickered back to Ryan. I exhaled, sipped from my glass, and tried to dismiss the nagging feeling in my gut. I convinced myself it was nothing, just paranoia. I refocused on the conversation around me, nodding along and acting like everything was normal. But nothing felt right. It was as if the room's atmosphere had shifted, leaving me suddenly feeling like an outsider looking in. And then, somehow, without my noticing the exact moment, Emily was standing with Ryan. They were talking and laughing, leaning in just a little too close. Her fingers brushed casually against his arm. Too casually. My grip on my glass tightened, the sound around me fading into the background. Music played, silverware clinked, conversations hummed, but none of it mattered. They were all I could focus on. Ryan inclined his head slightly, clearly engaged by whatever Emily was saying. He smiled and nodded, appearing entertained, interested. Then Emily made a tiny gesture that sent a chill down my spine. She reached up and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. It seemed minor, hardly noticeable at all. But I knew Emily. She did that only when she was nervous or when she was flirty. My jaw clenched tight. And then, she turned. For the very first time, she looked directly into my eyes across the crowded room. And in that moment, in that fleeting second, I saw something in her expression. Guilt. It flashed briefly, like something she hadn't intended for me to notice. But then, just as quickly, it vanished. She smiled at me warmly, innocently, as though nothing had happened at all. Like I'd made it all up. But I knew better. Because nothing was right anymore. Minutes ticked by, then an hour. Emily never moved away from Ryan's side. I struggled to keep up conversations, acting as though everything were perfectly fine. But my gaze kept wandering back to them. She laughed genuinely at his jokes, not the polite, formal laugh she usually offered at these work events. Her hand repeatedly brushed against his arm, fingertips lingering a fraction too long. And Ryan wasn't just humoring her flirtation. He was openly encouraging it, leaning close, his fingers subtly grazing the small of her back. Every time I looked, part of me desperately hoped I was misreading things. But the knot in my stomach only tightened further. Eventually, Emily turned to me, lightly resting her hand on my arm. "I need to take a call," she whispered, showing me the screen of her phone just long enough for me to see a number with no name attached. Something wasn't right. "Sure," I said slowly. Emily smiled, softly kissed my cheek, and disappeared into the crowd. I watched her walk away, tension building in my jaw. 5 minutes later, Ryan left as well. A cold dread swept over me. My eyes searched the crowded room. They weren't at the bar. They weren't on the dance floor. They weren't on the balcony outside. And suddenly I realized something troubling. I hadn't laid eyes on either of them in almost 20 minutes. My chest tightened. I set down my drink, fist clenching as I moved forward. Through the crowd. Past the tables. Down quieter hallways where the gala noise dwindled into a faint murmur. And then a soft giggle. Barely audible. Muffled. Hidden away. I stopped cold, my pulse pounding in my ears. A whisper. A hushed, low voice. Then a moan. I froze in place. That sound shot straight through me, jolting my entire body like I'd grabbed onto a live wire. My gut twisted sharply, but I moved toward the noise anyway. My breathing slowed down deliberately. Steadying myself. A dimly lit lounge door sat partially open, casting a soft glow into the hallway. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and eased the door further open. There they stood. Emily. Ryan. Pressed tightly against the wall, Emily's fingers clutching his suit jacket, his mouth trailing along her neck. My veins turned ice. Instantly, they froze in place. I stayed silent, holding up my phone, letting the camera capture every second clearly. Then, I finally spoke up. "This is Emily, my wife. This is Ryan, my boss. And this is them fooling around behind my back, while I'm right down the hall." Emily gasped sharply, immediately pulling away, her eyes wide with panic. "Mark," but her voice didn't matter to me anymore. Ryan raised his hands defensively, his expression growing tense. "Listen, man, this," but I cut him off before he could finish. I slid the phone back into my pocket, and without a second thought, swung my fist hard, landing squarely on Ryan's jaw. His head snapped sideways, and he stumbled backward, a grunt escaping his mouth. Before he could regain balance, I grabbed him firmly by the collar, dragging him back toward the bustling event hall. I shoved open the doors, stepping directly into the center of the crowded room. The music, laughter, and lively chatter abruptly came to a halt. A heavy, shocked silence settled. Every single person turned to stare. Raising my voice, I shouted loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You want to know who this guy is?" My words echoed sharply. "He's the one sleeping with my wife." An audible wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emily stood motionless in the doorway, her face ghost white. Ryan yanked himself free from my grip, panic tightly controlled in his eyes. Emily's voice trembled as she started. "Mark." I looked directly at her, cold and unyielding. "We're finished." I didn't wait for her to respond. I didn't need a reply. Without another glance, without hesitating, I simply walked away. The drive home was quiet. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, eyes blankly fixed ahead as the city lights passed in a blur. My phone buzzed repeatedly on the passenger seat. I didn't bother checking. I knew exactly who was calling. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat staring at our home, our place. It looked identical to how it always had, but now it was just an empty structure to me. Stepping inside, the air itself felt unfamiliar, as if I no longer belonged there. I grabbed a suitcase quickly, throwing in whatever clothes were nearby. I wouldn't stay, not tonight, not ever again. I couldn't sleep in the bed where Emily had once promised me forever. Then the buzzing resounded. I glanced at my phone screen. Emily again. 12 missed calls already. I considered shutting it off, but decided against it. I wanted her to know exactly what she'd done, exactly how much she'd ruined everything. Just as I zipped up the suitcase and reached for my keys, the front door burst open. Emily stood there, breathing heavily, her face streaked with tears. Her makeup smudged, chest heaving with unsteady breaths. "Mark, please, just listen," she pleaded, voice cracking. I scoffed bitterly, shaking my head. "There's nothing left to say, Emily." I brushed past her, aiming for the exit. Her hand shot out to grasp my arm, her fingers shaking. "It was a mistake, I swear. It meant nothing. Please don't end our marriage like this." I spun around, at her laughter escaping my lips. "A mistake? You embarrass me in front of everyone we know. My friends, my coworkers. You forced me to discover this in the worst possible way, and now you're asking me to forgive." She sobbed, clutching tightly at my arm, desperate to stop me. I pulled away harshly, her touch suddenly repulsive. "You don't get to say those words to me." My voice came out quiet, cold, and steady. "You had a choice, Emily, and you made it." Her expression crumbled, hands trembling as she reached again. "Mark, please." "We're done," I interrupted firmly, no hesitation in my voice. "I'm filing for divorce." The words struck her hard. Her knees buckled slightly, and she released a broken sob, shaking her head desperately. But I didn't stay around for excuses or apologies. I simply turned my back and walked out, leaving her cries behind me. Driving straight to a hotel, I checked into a small room, laying awake all night on the stiff mattress, staring blankly at the ceiling. Sleep never came. Images replayed over and over in my mind. Emily's shocked expression in the lounge, Ryan's arrogant smirk dissolving the instant they were caught, Emily's tearful pleading as I left her behind. None of it mattered now. Morning came, and without resting, I showered quickly and headed directly to the best divorce lawyer in town. Sitting across from him, my jaw clenched tightly, hands clasped firmly in front of me. "I want a divorce," I said clearly. "And I want her to leave with as little as possible." He nodded immediately, opening his notebook. "We'll make sure of it." With the divorce underway, I turned my attention next to Ryan. Walking into the office building later that morning, I kept my pace steady and composed. Ignoring the cheerful morning greetings from colleagues, I went straight to the HR department. They wouldn't see me the same way after today. Moments later, I was seated across from Deborah, head of human resources, setting my phone down deliberately on her desk. "You're going to want to watch this." I pressed play on the video. Deborah's expression darkened instantly as Ryan appeared on the screen, hands clearly on my wife. She remained silent as the video played on, Emily leaning eagerly into his touch, in their brief, unmistakable kiss sealing the betrayal. Once the video ended, Deborah exhaled slowly, pressing her lips into a tight, thin line. "Mart, this is extremely serious." "That's not all," I said evenly. "Ryan's been abusing his authority for years." There were always whispers, but no one had ever stepped up. "Well, I'm stepping up now. I want something done about it." And it was. Within hours, an internal investigation had begun. Employees, specifically women, started stepping forward with their own stories, some pressured into compromising positions, others deceived by empty promises of promotions. By week's end, Ryan was officially terminated. His career completely shattered. his reputation permanently ruined. And as for Emily? 2 days later, divorce papers arrived. I didn't warn her in advance. I didn't offer a heads up. I simply allowed the documents to land coldly in her hands, just as she'd allowed Ryan's hands to land on her. Then came the messages. Please don't do this. Marked, can we talk? I love you. And miss you. I stared at the screen without responding, not even once. Several days later, I returned briefly to the house. It wasn't part of my plan, but I left behind a few personal belongings I couldn't abandon. Pulling into the driveway, my grip tightened reflexively on the steering wheel. Parked outside was an unfamiliar sleek black sedan, someone else's car. I stepped out immediately, my body moving automatically before my mind even had a chance to fully process it. The house was strangely quiet as I turned the key and opened the front door. No television murmuring, no voices chatting, not even the faintest sign of movement. Then I heard something, barely noticeable, soft, muffled, coming from down the hallway. My heart slowed, beating heavily against my ribs. The sound came again, moans, coming from our bedroom. Without hesitation, I moved toward the sound, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. And there they were again. Emily, Ryan, together in the bed we'd shared. As soon as they saw me, they both froze. Ryan's face went completely blank, his mind clearly racing about whether he should say something or remain silent. Emily's eyes widened in shock and panic, and she quickly pulled up the sheets to cover herself. Mark, she gasped softly. She didn't look sorry. Not really. She looked caught, frustrated that I'd interrupted, like I'd ruined her chance of hiding this from me. Like I wasn't supposed to see exactly how little I had truly mattered to her all along. A heavy silence filled the room for a moment, until Emily's expression shifted, growing colder and sharper. What are you doing here? She asked harshly. I couldn't help but let out a dry, humorless laugh. Her first reaction was to ask me what I was doing here. Not an apology, not an explanation. Nothing. Just asking why I was standing in my own home, as if I were the unwelcome intruder. I stared quietly at Emily, then at Ryan, then at the bed that was clearly no longer mine. Slowly shaking my head, I said quietly, almost to myself, I definitely made the right decision. And with that, I turned around and simply walked away. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. I didn't need to do anything more. Because this was all the proof I needed. Emily had cried. She had pleaded. She had promised that she loved me. And then barely 2 days later, she brought him back to her house. Back into her bed. That said everything clearly enough. I closed the door firmly behind me, never once glancing back. In the weeks that followed, I focused entirely on putting myself back together. I moved into a modest apartment. A blank slate. No memories, no lingering ghosts from the past, just a fresh start. Life became simple, straightforward. Worked. Gym. Occasional drinks with friends who truly mattered. Nothing flashy. Nothing complicated. But it was mine. The divorce moved faster than I'd anticipated. Emily didn't bother contesting it. She kept the house, along with a small portion of my savings. But I honestly didn't care anymore. Then, one day, I heard something that almost made me laugh out loud. Ryan had dumped her. It hadn't taken very long. Maybe a few months at most. Ryan had gotten exactly what he wanted, and when the novelty wore off, he moved on without hesitation. Exactly as I'd expected. I could almost picture Emily's expression when she finally understood she'd thrown everything good away for absolutely nothing. And then, predictably, one final message popped up on my phone. Marked, please. Can we talk? I stared at the screen quietly. There was a time when a message like that would have rattled me deeply. But not anymore. I read the text. I deleted it. And I moved forward. Because some things simply aren't worth holding on to. Thank you for watching.